Hey guys, today's story is a little different. Picture a sunlit auditorium, the air buzzing with pride, the rustle of programs, and the faint scent of flowers pinned to graduation gowns. My daughter Lily crossed the stage, her cap tassel swaying, her smile a beacon of everything I'd fought for. Then in the midst of the crowd's applause, my husband David leaned close, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "I'm leaving you after this." The words were a blade slicing through the joy, leaving a cold, jagged wound. My heart stuttered, the world tilting as his betrayal sank in. My name's Emma Harper, 45, a high school history teacher who's poured 2 decades into a marriage, a daughter, a home, only to have it unravel in public. That moment, with Lily shining and David's smugness beside me, felt like a theft of everything I'd built. And if you think karma's slow, wait until you hear this. So, before you get pulled in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually believe that betrayal always comes back around. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and have you ever had someone shatter your trust? Now sit back. Let the room go quiet and let me tell you how it really went down. The auditorium was a sea of black gowns, flashing cameras, and proud murmurs, but David's words echoed in my skull, sharp and relentless. I gripped the armrest, my knuckles pale, forcing my face to stay calm, a mask for Lily's sake. She was up there, clutching her diploma, her eyes finding mine in the crowd, her smile bright enough to break my heart. I wouldn't let him ruin this moment for her or for me. My mind churned, replaying the past few months. His late nights at the office, his curt replies, the unfamiliar cologne that clung to his shirts. I'd suspected troubling an affair, maybe, or a midlife crisis, but I'd buried my doubts, chalking them up to the grind of our lives. Now, his announcement was a confession, delivered with a smug tilt of his mouth, as if he'd planned this public gut punch to watch me crumble. I glanced at him, his eyes fixed on the stage, his posture relaxed, like he'd already checked out of our life. The betrayal wasn't just his plan to leave, it was the cruelty of choosing this moment, our daughter's milestone, to stage his exit. My chest burned, a mix of shock and fury, but I swallowed it, letting it coil tight inside me. Screaming would have felt good, but it would have given him what he wanted. A scene, a broken wife for all to see. I wasn't that woman. I'd spent 22 years with David, building a home, raising Lily, teaching kids about the rise and fall of empires. If he thought he could topple mine without a fight, he'd forgotten who I was. The ceremony dragged on, each speaker's words a distant hum. I kept my hands folded, my breathing even, but my thoughts were a storm. I'd seen the signs, bank statements that didn't add up, hushed phone calls he'd brush off with a smile. I hadn't confronted him, not out of fear, but because I'd been gathering pieces quietly, like a historian piecing together a lost story. In a locked drawer at home, I had copies of those statements, screenshots of odd transactions, even a note I'd found in his jacket pocket, signed with a woman's initial. Call it instinct or survival, but I'd sensed a reckoning coming. Now David's words confirmed it, and the smugness in his eyes told me he thought he'd won the war before I'd even known we were fighting. As the graduates tossed their caps, the crowd surged to their feet, a wave of cheers and tears. I stood clapping, my smile for Lily alone. She ran to us on the lawn, her cap askew, and I pulled her into a fierce hug, her warmth a lifeline. David stood nearby, his smile practiced, but I saw the impatience in his stance, like he was already halfway out the door. I kept my voice steady, laughing with Lily, posing for photos, all while my mind sharpened. He thought this was his moment of control, but I'd been preparing, even if I hadn't fully admitted it to myself. Those papers in my bag, divorce documents, financial records, a claim to what was mine, were my counterstrike, ready to turn his grand exit into a trap. Walking to the car, David's hand brushed mine, a hollow gesture that made my skin crawl. Lily chattered about college, oblivious to the tension. I let her voice ground me, but my thoughts were elsewhere, already flipping through my plan. He'd chosen this stage to humiliate me, but I'd rewrite the script. My heart was steady now, a quiet power rising like a tide. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for Lily, for the life we'd built, for the woman I'd become. He'd lit the fuse, but I'd be the one to bring the fire. Some betrayals don't just break you, they forge you into something unstoppable. The graduation lawn was still buzzing with families, their laughter a distant hum as I walked to the car, my bag heavy with the weight of my secret. David's announcement had cracked something open in me, but it wasn't despair, it was clarity. I'd suspected his betrayal for months, and while his words at the ceremony were meant to shatter me, they only sharpened my resolve. In my bag, tucked beneath a scarf, were the divorce papers I'd prepared weeks ago, along with financial records and evidence of his hidden accounts. I hadn't planned to use them today, but David's public stunt had changed the game. He thought he was leaving me. I was about to show him I'd already left. My steps were steady, my mind a quiet forge, hammering out the next move. In the car, Lily sat in the back scrolling her phone, her excitement filling the silence. David drove, his hands loose on the wheel, his face smug like he'd already written me out of his story. I stared out the window, the world blurring past, and let my thoughts settle. I'd started preparing months ago, when I found that note in his jacket, a woman's initial, a date, a time. It wasn't proof of an affair, but it was enough to wake me up. I'd begun digging quietly, copying bank statements that showed transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, saving emails he'd left open on our shared laptop. I'd hired a lawyer, Claire, a sharp woman who'd seen too many men like David to be fooled by their charm. She'd helped me draft the papers, ensuring I'd protect Lily and claim what was mine. The betrayal wasn't just the possibility of another woman, it was the secrecy, the way he'd built a separate life while I kept our family whole. I'd spent years teaching history, showing kids how power shifts, how the unprepared fall. David thought he held the power, but I'd been studying him, learning his moves. My bag sat on the floorboard, the papers inside a silent promise. I hadn't told anyone, not even Lily, who deserved better than her father's cowardice. The secrecy was my shield, but it also gnawed at me. Was I becoming like him, hiding truths to win? The question stung, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about deception, it was about survival, about protecting what mattered most. We pulled into our driveway, the house looming, its familiar red brick suddenly foreign. Lily bounded inside, calling about pizza for dinner, but David lingered by the car, his eyes on me. "We need to talk," he said, his tone clipped like he was dictating terms. I nodded, my face neutral, and followed him to the porch. He started pacing, his words rehearsed. He was unhappy, needed space, wanted to move on. Each phrase was a dart, but I didn't flinch. I let him talk, his voice rising, oblivious to the storm I was holding back. My fingers brushed the bag strap, the papers inside a heartbeat away. He thought this was his moment to walk away clean, but I was about to flip the script. I'd planned to wait, to serve the papers through Claire after a calm discussion, but his arrogance, his choice to blindside me at Lily's graduation changed that. I interrupted him mid-sentence, my voice low, steady. "David, you don't get to decide how this ends." His eyes narrowed, confusion flickering, and I reached into my bag. The papers were crisp, the folder cool against my fingers. I held them out, my gaze locked on his. "I filed for divorce 2 weeks ago," I said, each word deliberate. "You're not leaving me, I'm leaving you." His mouth opened, but no sound came. The air shifted, his smugness crumbling, and I felt a quiet power, a reversal that tasted like justice. He'd wanted to control the narrative, but I'd been writing it all along. Inside, Lily was laughing on the phone, oblivious to the earthquake outside. I stepped past David, leaving him frozen on the porch, the papers in his hand. My heart was steady, but a new conflict stirred relief tangled with guilt. I'd protected Lily's day, but I'd also hidden this from her, a truth she'd soon face. I pushed the thought down, focusing on the now. The papers outlined everything. My claim to the house, shared custody, a demand for transparency on his hidden accounts. Claire had made sure they were ironclad. David's empire was built on lies, and I was pulling the first brick. He thought he could break me, but I was already rebuilding. Some endings aren't endings at all, theory, the start of something fiercer. The porch light buzzed faintly as I stepped inside, leaving David clutching the divorce papers, his silhouette a ghost in the dusk. The house smelled of Lily's lavender shampoo, a fragile reminder of the life I was fighting to protect. Handing him those documents had been a spark, igniting my resolve, but it also stirred a quiet dread. I'd outmaneuvered him, but this wasn't a solo victory. David's betrayal was a deep cut, and to heal it, I needed allies, people whose loyalty ran deeper than his lies, who'd help me build a counterstrike that would hold. My plan was taking shape, but it was delicate, a structure needing stronger beams. I moved to the kitchen, my steps measured, and reached for my phone. It was time to call in my army. Lily was upstairs, her laughter floating down as she chatted on the phone, unaware of the fault line splitting our family. I sat at the kitchen counter, its worn wood familiar from years of grading papers and planning dinners, now transformed into a command center. My first call was to Claire, my lawyer, whose voice cut through the line like a blade. I recounted David's announcement at the graduation, my preemptive strike with the papers, and the need for a broader strategy. "I'll dig deeper into his financials," she said, her tone all business. "If he's hiding money, we'll find it." Claire wasn't just a lawyer, she was a tactician. Her confidence a steel thread weaving through my own. But legal firepower wasn't enough. I needed people who knew the weight of my years with David, who'd seen the life I'd built. I texted Rachel, my best friend since college, a therapist whose intuition had always outpaced mine. She'd warned me months ago about David's growing distance, her words gentle but pointed. When I called, she picked up instantly. What's happened?" I laid it out: the auditorium, his cruel timing, my counterblow. Her silence was heavy, then she said, "I'm on my way. You're not facing this alone." Her promise was a tether, pulling me back from the edge of solitude. Next, I contacted Tom, a colleague from school who'd become family over years of shared lunches and late-night grading sessions. A math teacher with a knack for numbers, he was meticulous, the perfect ally to unravel David's financial web. "Say the word, Emma," he said, his voice steady. "We'll nail him." Their loyalty was a shield, but it also sharpened my guilt. I'd kept this from Lily, and the weight of that secret pressed harder now. The kitchen darkened as the sun sank, the clock ticking toward evening. Lily bounded downstairs, asking about dinner, and I ordered pizza, keeping my tone light, my smile a practiced mask. But inside, I wrestled with a new conflict. Protecting Lily meant shielding her from this truth, but hiding it felt like echoing David's deceit. I buried the thought, focusing on the allies rallying around me. Rachel arrived, her hug fierce, her eyes searching mine for fractures. "You're stronger than he'll ever know," she said, her words a quiet power that steadied my hands. Tom followed, his laptop under his arm, already pulling up spreadsheets. Claire joined by speakerphone, her voice a calm anchor in the chaos. We gathered around the table, pizza boxes open but barely touched, the air thick with purpose. I shared my evidence. The note from David's jacket, the bank statements with unexplained transfers, the emails he'd left open. Tom's brow furrowed as he traced a transaction to an unfamiliar account. "This is deliberate," he said, his pen tapping the screen. "He's been moving money for months." The words landed like a cold stone, confirming David's calculated exit. Claire outlined next steps. A forensic audit, a motion to freeze his accounts. Rachel focused on Lily, suggesting ways to ease her into the truth when the time came. I listened, my coffee cooling, my mind cataloging each piece of the plan. The room was still, our shared resolve a binding force. Gratitude warmed me, but fear lingered. These were my people. But the fight was mine, and I couldn't hide behind them forever. I stood, refilling mugs, my movements deliberate despite the storm inside. Rachel's gaze followed me, soft but piercing. "You don't have to be unbreakable, Em," she said. I nodded but didn't reply. Strength wasn't a choice, it was survival. We wrapped up the plan solid. Claire would hunt assets, Tom would map the money, Rachel would be my emotional compass. David thought he'd ambushed me, but I was forging an alliance stronger than his lies. He'd started this war, but I'd end it. Some battles aren't won Theory won with the fire of those who fight beside you. The kitchen table still held the ghosts of last night's war council coffee mugs, Tom's spreadsheets, the faint scent of pizza lingering in the air. I woke to a quiet house, Lily asleep upstairs, her graduation cap slung over a chair, a bittersweet relic of the day David tried to unravel me. Handing him the divorce papers had been my opening move, but today was the true reversal, the moment I'd turn his betrayal into his defeat. My allies were in place. Claire scouring his finances, Tom tracing his hidden accounts, Rachel ready to guide me through Lily's inevitable questions. But this was my stage, and I'd make David feel the weight of his choices with a calm that cut deeper than any outburst. I dressed deliberately: jeans, a crisp white blouse, no jewelry, just the quiet armor of a woman who knew her strength, and slipped the updated papers into my bag. My heart was a steady drum, my mind a forge shaping the next strike. David had texted late, demanding we meet at a downtown coffee shop, his words curt, like he still held the reins. I agreed, knowing he expected a fight, maybe a plea, something he could twist to his advantage. He didn't know I'd spent the night with Claire, refining the papers to include Tom's latest find. An offshore account with transfers stretching back a year. A secret vault he thought I'd never crack. The betrayal wasn't just his plan to leave, it was the meticulous theft of our shared life. Every dollar a step toward his new future. I drove to the shop, the morning sun slicing through the windshield, my thoughts sharp as I rehearsed each move. This wasn't just about divorce. It was about reclaiming my narrative, and I'd do it with precision. The coffee shop was warm, smelling of roasted beans and fresh croissants, its tables dotted with morning regulars. David sat by the window, his suit jacket crisp, his posture stiff, a man trying to project control. I slid into the chair across from him, my bag on the seat, the papers inside a silent storm. He launched into his speech, his voice low, practiced. He was sorry it came to this, needed a fresh start, wanted to keep things civil. Each word was a calculated jab, but I didn't react. I let him talk, his eyes avoiding mine, his fingers drumming the table, betraying his unease. My silence was a weapon, stretching the moment until he faltered, his confidence fraying. He thought he was scripting my exit, but I was about to rewrite his. When he paused, waiting for my surrender, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, its weight solid in my hands. "You don't get to set the terms, David," I said, my voice steady, each syllable a stone. I slid the papers across the table, their edges sharp against the wood. "These are updated. I know about the offshore account, the transfers, the lies you thought I'd miss." His face froze, his hand hovering over the folder, shock wiping away his smugness. I leaned forward, my gaze pinning him. "You chose Lily's graduation to announce you're leaving. I chose to file first. This is my story now." The air crackled, his control shattering, and I felt a quiet power, a reversal that tasted like cold steel. He'd wanted to break me in public. Now he was the one laid bare. He opened the folder, his eyes scanning the pages: divorce terms, a demand for full financial disclosure, a claim to the house and half his assets. Claire had ensured every clause was airtight, backed by Tom's evidence of his financial maneuvering. David's jaw clenched, his silence louder than any protest. The shop hummed around us, oblivious to the earthquake at our table. I thought of Lily, her laughter, her future, and the guilt I'd carried for shielding her from this. That guilt lingered, a shadow on my triumph, but it didn't dim my resolve. Protecting her meant dismantling David's lies, and I was doing that now, one deliberate cut at a time. I'd spent years teaching history, showing kids how empires fall. Today I was the one toppling his. I stood, leaving the papers with him, my voice calm but unyielding. "You have a week to respond, or Claire takes this to court." His eyes flicked up, a mix of anger and fear, but I was already turning away, the bell above the door chiming as I stepped into the sunlight. The weight of his betrayal was still there, but it was lighter, eclipsed by the strength I'd summoned. I'd turned his moment of victory into his reckoning, and it felt like justice, clean and sharp. He'd thought he could write my defeat, but I was the author now. Some endings don't come with tears, they come with the sound of a door closing on a life you've outgrown. The coffee shop's bell still rang in my ears as I drove home, the morning sun climbing higher, its light cutting sharp angles across the road. Handing David the updated divorce papers had been a precise strike, his stunned silence a victory I could still feel. But triumph was a fleeting spark, and I knew the real fallout was only beginning. His empire of lies was fracturing, and I'd set it in motion, but now I had to navigate the aftermath, shielding Lily, bracing for his retaliation, and holding the ground I'd claimed. My allies were tightening the net. Claire digging deeper into his finances, Tom mapping his hidden accounts, Rachel preparing to help me guide Lily through the truth. But this moment was mine to shape, and I'd do it with a steady hand. My grip on the wheel was firm, my heart a quiet forge, ready to mold the chaos into something I could command. At home, Lily was sprawled at the kitchen table, Her graduation photos scattered like fragments of a brighter yesterday. She grinned, asking about my morning, her voice light with post-ceremony glow. I deflected with a smile, ordering her favorite muffins from a bakery app, but guilt coiled tighter in my chest. She deserved to know her father's betrayal, but I couldn't shatter her world yet, not until I'd built a softer landing. I kissed her forehead and slipped upstairs to my office, the door's lock clicking shut. My desk was a battlefield, bank statements, scribbled notes, a crumpled note from David's jacket, all evidence of his double life. I opened my laptop to Claire's latest email. She'd uncovered another account, linked to a woman named Vanessa, with transfers matching the dates I'd found. The name landed like ice water, confirming the affair I'd only guessed at. Anger surged, but I channeled it, letting it sharpen my focus. David's silence since the coffee shop was deafening. No texts, no calls, likely scrambling to salvage his plan. But I knew him. He'd come back swinging, maybe with lawyers, maybe with manipulation, trying to rewrite the story. I called Claire, her voice a steady pulse through the phone. "He'll try to dodge the audit," she said. "But we've got enough to lock his accounts." She was pushing for a court order, using Tom's evidence to prove fraud. Tom had sent a new spreadsheet, each line a nail in David's coffin, transfers, dates, amounts, all meticulously traced. Rachel was ready to help me talk to Lily, her therapist, a lifeline. Their support was my backbone, but it also deepened my sense of isolation. This was my family, my wound, my war, and no one could fight it for me. By mid-afternoon, David made his move. A text, cold and formal. "Meet me. My lawyer needs to discuss terms." I read it in the living room, Lily's laughter drifting from the backyard where she was video calling friends. My first instinct was to let Claire handle it, but I wanted to see his face to gauge how far he'd fallen. I agreed to a nearby park, a neutral space where the air was warm, the grass alive with summer hum. David stood by a bench, his lawyer beside him, a polished man in a gray suit, all sharp edges and fake smiles. I approached, my bag light without the papers, my posture calm but unyielding. The lawyer launched into a pitch. A fair settlement, shared custody, no financial audit. I listened, my face still, while David watched me, his eyes searching for a crack. He was tired, his usual charm dulled, replaced by a brittle tension. When the lawyer paused, I turned to David, my voice low, deliberate. "You thought you could bury a year of lies," I said, each word a measured cut. "Every transfer, every secret, is documented now. You don't get to walk away untouched." The lawyer sputtered, but David's shoulders slumped, his defiance fracturing. I felt a quiet power, a control that didn't need volume or tears. I told them Claire would respond, then turned away, the park's buzz fading as I walked back to my car. His world was collapsing, and I was the one dismantling it piece by calculated piece. At home, I sat with Lily, watching her flip through college brochures, her excitement a fragile light. The guilt was still there, a shadow on my victory, but it was morphing into resolve. I'd tell her soon, with Rachel's guidance, framing it as a fresh start, not a loss. David's empire was built on deception, and I'd exposed it, for Lily as much as for me. The house felt different now, less like a war zone, more like a foundation I could rebuild. The fight wasn't over, there'd be more battles, more papers, but as I looked at Lily, her future bright despite the cracks, I knew I'd guard our peace with everything I had. Some ruins don't bury you, they become the bedrock of a stronger life. The park's hum faded as I drove home, the weight of David's defeat settling into me like a quiet tide. His empire of lies was in ruins, my calculated strike with the papers and my allies' relentless pressure ensuring he couldn't escape the truth. But victory wasn't a clean sweep, it left scars, questions, and a future I had to rebuild. Lily's laughter greeted me as I stepped into the house, her college brochure spread across the kitchen table, a reminder of what I was fighting for. The guilt of shielding her from David's betrayal still lingered, but it was softening, giving way to a resolve to create something new, not just for her but for me. This wasn't just about closing a chapter. It was about writing a new one free from his shadow. I set my bag down, the paper's absence a relief, and began the work of reclaiming my life. I started small, grounding myself in the familiar. I cooked dinner, Lily's favorite, spaghetti with homemade marinara scent filling the kitchen, pushing back the sterile air of confrontation. As we ate, Lily talked about dorms and majors, her eyes bright, and I listened, my smile genuine but my mind split. I'd tell her soon with Rachel's help, framing David's exit as a chance for us to grow, not a loss. The thought of that conversation tightened my chest, but I didn't shy away. I'd spent years teaching history, showing kids how societies rebuild after collapse. Now I was my own student, learning to reconstruct a life after betrayal. The act of cooking, of listening to Lily, was a quiet power, a step toward a home that was ours alone. By evening I moved to my office, the desk less a war zone now, more a workspace for renewal. I sorted through the papers I'd kept, bank statements, emails, the note from David's jacket, filing them away, not as weapons, but as relics of a fight I'd won. Claire had called earlier, confirming the court order to freeze David's accounts was in motion. Tom had sent a final spreadsheet, tying up the last of his financial threads. Their work was done, and I felt a surge of gratitude but also a new weight. Their support had carried me, but this next phase was mine to walk. I opened my laptop and started a new document, not for divorce or evidence, but for a list of goals, dreams I'd shelved during years of keeping the family whole. A trip to Italy maybe, or a master's degree I'd always wanted. The act of writing was a spark, a reclaiming of a self I'd almost forgotten. The house felt different now, its walls less burdened by David's presence. I walked through it, noting small changes. I'd a new paint color for the living room, a garden in the backyard. Each idea was a stitch, mending the tears his betrayal had left. But as I stood in the hallway, a photo of us as a family caught my eye. Lily's 5th birthday, David's arm around me, all smiles. A pang of loss hit, not for him, but for the version of me who'd believed in forever. That conflict was raw, a reminder that even victories carry costs. I didn't take the photo down. It was part of my story, a chapter I'd survived, not erased. I'd build around it, not over it. I called Rachel, my voice steady as I asked for advice on talking to Lily. She suggested a weekend away, just the two of us, to create a safe space for the truth. "You're not just her mom," she said. "You're her strength." Her words were a quiet power anchoring me. I booked a cabin by a lake, a place Lily loved, and felt a shift, guilt giving way to hope. David's world had crumbled, but mine was rising, not on vengeance but on choices I could make. I didn't need his regret or his pain. I needed this, the hum of a house that was mine, the promise of a future I'd shape. As night fell, I sat on the porch, a glass of wine in hand, the air cool against my skin. The stars were sharp, a map of possibilities. David was out there, likely plotting with his lawyer, but he was no longer my center. I'd faced his betrayal, not with screams, but with a strategy that broke his narrative. The house, Lily, my dreams, they were my empire now, built on truth, not lies. I thought of my students, how I'd tell them empires don't just fall, they're remade by those brave enough to start again. My heart was steady, my resolve a flame that wouldn't flicker. Some endings aren't endings at all, theory, the first bricks of a stronger foundation. The weeks that followed were slow, deliberate, like the first blooms after a long winter. I repainted the living room, a soft sage that caught the morning light, and planted a garden, its soil rich with promise. Lily and I went to the lake, where I told her about David's leaving. Her tears met with my steady hand, Rachel's advice guiding us to a new bond. David faded, his lawyer's calls handled by Claire, his accounts untangled, his lies irrelevant. I didn't chase his remorse. I chased my peace, and I found it in small moments: Lily's laughter, a book I read for pleasure, a plan for Italy next summer. I'm not the Emma who trusted too easily, who built a life around a man's promises. I'm sharper now, forged by betrayal but not hardened, freed. Pain doesn't just break you. It teaches you to build better, to choose yourself. My home is my sanctuary, its walls holding my strength, my growth. I sit in the garden, the flowers young but thriving, and feel a calm that runs deep. This isn't the end of my story, but it's the end of his and mine. I've risen, not as a victim, but as a woman who knows her worth. The stars shine above, the night soft, and I am whole.